Very good evening to you all. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Harikrishnan and the whole team for giving me this opportunity to address you all. Coming to the burden of heart failure, the burden of heart failure in the developed countries is rivaled only by cancer, and you all know the mortality rate is somewhere around 40% at 5 years, 5 year follow-up rate. And the genetic cardiomyopathies include dilated cardiomyopathy, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy, and restrictive cardiomyopathy. Regarding the genetic cardiomyopathy, in pediatric population with heart failure, there is around 40% familial cases where there a monogenic cause can be identified. And when you consider the adults with idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathy, around 30% of the cases, there is a positive family history. These are the reasons why we should think that there is a lot of cases where there is a genetic cardiomyopathy, which is underlying. And coming to genetic cardiomyopathy, the importance is that there is an early onset, and these patients will be having just because it is manifesting very early, they can have a very bad, the morbidity and mortality will be very bad for them. And once the mutation is identified in this family, we can offer cascade screening so that the other carriers can be identified at an early stage. And early risk stratification and prevention of sudden cardiac death is also possible in patients for whom they are having a particular mutation. And once the cellular basis is identified, the novel therapeutic targets can also be implemented. Rather than giving a didactic lecture, I thought that I will take you through a few case scenarios which will make you understand the condition a little more easy. So coming to the case one, this is a 2-month-old child, male baby, who was born to a non-consanguineous couple and had presented with recurrent attacks of respiratory infection. And the baby had central hypotonia, feeble voice, and the tone in both upper limbs and lower limbs were only grade 3 and had a protruded tongue and weak intercostal muscles. This is a photograph where you can see the protruded tongue and the tone is very less. And you can see that the child is extremely floppy and there is huge cardiomegaly, and the ECG is showing severe left ventricular hypertrophy and short PI interval. Coming to the echocardiographic finding, the baby was having a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with a left ventricular mass index of 71 grams per meter square, which is much high for that age group. And the confirmation of the diagnosis of Pompe disease was done by doing an enzyme analysis in the leukocytes. The acid alpha glucosidase levels were only 0.4 against an expected of 10 to 49. And a mutation analysis and CRIM status, I'll just explain to you what exactly is this CRIM status. And this child was having a homozygous mutation in the GAA gene. And the baby was started on enzyme replacement therapy at the age of 11 weeks. Coming to cross-reactive immunological, CRIM is otherwise called as cross-reactive immunological material. As you all know, Pompe's disease is an autosomal recessive disorder where there are two defective genes. Each gene is inherited from one of the parents. So if a baby is having two deleterious mutations, and which can lead to complete absence of acid alpha glucosidase by Western blot test, and these patients are called as CRIM negative. And those who are having little bit of the GAA protein by Western blot is called as CRIM positive. The obvious difference between the two is that in CRIM positive patients, the mutation is a milder one. Most probably they have something like a missense mutation. And CRIM negative patients, they uniformly do poorly and they experience, then their clinical decline will be it will be very bad because of the high levels of antibodies. So in addition to the enzyme replacement therapy, these patients usually will need an immunosuppressive therapy as well. And Pompe's disease is otherwise called as the glycogen storage disease type 2. It is an autosomal recessive disorder. There is deficiency of acid alpha glucosidase. And the main clinical clues would be an elevated CPK, LDH, and SGOT. And the acid alpha glucosidase activity can be measured in the leukocytes and also in the dried blood spots. And the confirmation gold standard is the mutation analysis by analyzing the mutation in the GAA gene. There are three types of Pompe's disease: infantile, juvenile, and adult onset. Only infantile type of Pompe disease will be having a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, whereas in juvenile type and adult type, there will not be any cardiac involvement. The prevalence of the disease is between 1 in 40,000 to 1 in 46,000. In classic infantile Pompe's disease, the levels of the enzyme is much low. It is less than 1%, whereas in juvenile and adult, it is around less than 30%. That is the reason why these patients are much milder than the classic infantile Pompe disease. And dried blood spots are very useful for newborn screening also. And now this newborn screening is available for Pompe's disease in 2 states in the US. And enzyme replacement therapy for Pompe disease was approved way back in 2006. And currently we are treating 6 patients with Pompe's disease. We are treating infantile, juvenile, as well as adult patients. And coming to enzyme replacement therapy, what we are giving is the missing enzymes. So what we give is the recombinant human alpha glucosidase enzyme. The dosage is 20 milligram per kg. It will be given once in every 2 weeks. It is given as an infusion over the period of 4 to 5 hours. The dosage is 50 milligram per vial, and it's an extremely costly therapy. So how we are giving the treatment for the patient is through a charitable access program. And the treatment should be started as early as possible, because even before permanent damage that has happened to the cardiac myocytes. And the enlarged tongue is a very good clue for patients who are having infantile Pompe disease. And in addition, they will be having hepatomegaly also. And in patients who are untreated, usually they die before the age of 1 year. Coming to case 2, this is a patient who was 47 years old, and he was evaluated by the cardiologist because he was having chest pain, and he was found to have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And at the time of diagnosis, he was also having a declining renal function, and his serum creatinine values were 1.4 milligrams per cent, and he was treated symptomatically. This patient hails from not from Kerala, he is from Karnataka, and his serum creatinine levels were gradually, it was going up, and it had gone up to 3.5 milligrams per cent. And just because he was deteriorating, he was evaluated in detail by the nephrologist, and a renal biopsy had confirmed that this patient is having Fabry's disease. So zebra bodies can be identified by the renal biopsy. And then this patient was transferred to our department for further evaluation. The alpha galactosidase levels were very low in this person, and the mutation was confirmed. Study was done, and it had confirmed that this patient is having Fabry's disease. And we have done a cascade screening, and we checked the relatives, and his sister and the nephew were also, they were not symptomatic, but they were also confirmed to be having Fabry's disease. And currently he is on enzyme replacement therapy, and he is undergoing hemodialysis. So these are the 2 pictures which I want you to see. One is the cornea verticillata. What you are seeing here is a slit lamp picture. Here, this is called as a typical cat's whisker sign, or the white line as you are seeing here, which is going from a single point, it is going outwards. This is due to the sphingolipid accumulation in the lysosomes of the corneal epithelium. This can be very easily identified by doing a slit lamp evaluation. And these patients will also be having associated angiokeratoma. These are the angiokeratomas which you can see. Because apart from bleeding, it will not create any other problem. But evaluation by doing a slit lamp evaluation is very useful for identifying these cases. So in Fabry's disease, the importance is that these patients will be having, in addition to hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, they can have stroke, they can also have progressive renal failure. So the importance is that once we take the family history, some of the people might be having cardiomyopathy, some others might be having stroke, and some let others be having renal failure. So it is extremely important to ask for history of stroke as well as for history of renal failure in relatives. And among the patients who were having hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in males and female cohort, the prevalence of Fabry disease has been identified to be somewhere between 0.9 to 0.94. So it's a very important disease to be thought of. And studies have shown that there's a delay of up to 15 years before a correct diagnosis can be confirmed, because these patients can present in any of these ways. And at this juncture, it is important to know that the females with Fabry disease, I told that the diagnosis is by doing an enzyme analysis. But we cannot make a diagnosis by doing an enzyme analysis in a female because this is an X-linked disorder. So just because a female is having two X chromosomes, the enzyme levels might not go beyond a low level. So around 60% of the females with Fabry disease will not be identified by if we are doing only enzyme analysis. So in all suspected cases of females with Fabry disease, you will have to confirm the diagnosis by doing a mutation study. Coming to the cardiovascular aspects, around 60% of the males and females with Fabry disease will be having an associated cardiac involvement. And the features include hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or myocardial fibrosis or fatal arrhythmias. They are really prone for life-threatening ventricular arrhythmias. Actually, we are having 17 patients under our care with Fabry disease. And amongst them, 2 patients have already undergone cardiac pacing because of very bad ventricular arrhythmias. And short PI interval is a very important clue for this condition. Cardiac MRI is a very good clue, very good modality for identifying this condition. The late gadolinium enhancement, what you are seeing here, this green arrow shows the late gadolinium enhancement in the cardiac MRI. That shows that there is a fibrosis which has already happened, and enzyme replacement therapy will reduce the left ventricular mass in patients with HCM. But if the damage is very severe, then it's very difficult to go back from what has already happened. So in last year, we have done an extensive evaluation with 10 centers all around India from 10 different genetic centers to identify the burden of Fabry disease in India. And we identified 54 patients with proven Fabry disease. And we identified that amongst these patients, 49 patients had undergone detailed echocardiogram evaluation, and amongst them, 22 patients were having left ventricular hypertrophy. So around 44.8% of this cohort were having hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So it is a very important condition to be thought of. Coming to case 3, I'll show you the next picture. So this is the third case. What I want you to know is about Noonan syndrome. In Noonan syndrome, what happens is these babies will be having a coarse face, hypertelorism, and a long philtrum with deep filter pillar, and they can also have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And actually 14 genes are identified to be cause for Noonan syndrome. And PTPN11 is the most common one, whereas RAF1 is the one which can lead to severe cardiomyopathy. Can I take 5 more? Is my time over?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Your discussion time has started, ma'am.
Okay. So, okay. Can I take 3 more minutes?
Dr. Harikrishnan?
Yeah, please. Please go ahead.
Okay. This is in this condition, here, this is a non-consanguineous couple with non-compaction of the left ventricle. And in addition to hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, this patient was having an associated neutropenia. So this condition is called as a Barth syndrome. And there is another condition called where you can have where you can have cardiomyopathy with sensory neural hearing loss and also with cone rod dystrophy. So there is these conditions, they can present with Alström syndrome. And there is another condition where you can have dense cataract with hypertrophic with cardiomyopathy, and they can have, if they are having associated severe lactic acidosis, you should think about a condition called Senger syndrome. This is a mitochondrial disorder. So I just want to show you which are the genes that should be checked in dilated cardiomyopathy. There are mainly 4 genes. One is the titin gene. It is seen in around 25% of the cases. LMNA gene, when there is an associated conduction abnormality, you should always think about LMNA gene. And third one is MYH7 genes in around 5 to 10%. And cardiac TNNT2 gene in these are the 4 genes that should be checked in dilated cardiomyopathy. Whereas in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you should around 50% of the cases are contributed by MYH7 or MYBPC3 gene and or TNNT2 or TNN13 gene. So this is a case, around 22 cases have been identified by Dr. Hisham, where a PRKAG2 gene has been identified in South Indian population, where the patients were having hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with progressive conduction disturbances. So this is also an important gene to be checked. In mitochondrial cardiomyopathy, The hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or a dilated cardiomyopathy can happen for patients with MELAS or MERF or LACE disease in around 70 to 40% of the cases. In arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy, these are the genes to be checked. And in restrictive cardiomyopathy, you should think about TNNI3 or DESG. So to sum up, a detailed phenotypic evaluation is the key to identification of underlying genetic disorder, and mutation analysis helps to cascade screening or risk stratification or for implementation of preventive strategies. And prenatal diagnosis cannot be offered if you are not having a confirmatory diagnosis in the proband. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very comprehensive talk. I just have one question that have you done any suggestions about intrauterine diagnosis, maybe by amniocentesis or something? Do you advise some patients or not?
Exactly. Because if you have a diagnosis, all the other cases which I have shown, something like Sanger syndrome, Barth syndrome, Pompey's disease, all these families have come to us for prenatal diagnosis only. So what I want you to understand is once an index case is coming, we should make a diagnosis, or we should do a genetic analysis and confirm the diagnosis so that we can offer a prenatal diagnosis by doing a CVS at 12 weeks of gestation.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Sheila, if a child is identified with a mutation, so what is your protocol of following up those patients? And how do you advise to screen the family?
Excuse me, for which condition you are asking, Dr. Harikrishnan?
Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
Okay. So if in a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, are you asking about something about the Pompey's disease or something like that, or?
No, a patient clinically and echocardiographically hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you are identified a mutation in that particular patient. So how will you go about advising the family?
It's all important to know whether it is a autosomal recessive disorder or an autosomal dominant disorder. In around 50% of the cases of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and if the genes are, if it is due to a sarcomeric mutation, it will always be an autosomal dominant disorder. So we'll check the parents because in autosomal dominant disorder, or even the affected parent might not be that severely affected, because they can have a phenotypic variation in the same family itself. So we will check the first degree relatives for the presence of the mutation in that family. Definitely we'll check for the parents, and also we'll check the siblings. And if it is an autosomal recessive disorder, we'll check the carrier status in the parents. And if you retrospectively, once we identify that if the parents are carriers, because for an autosomal recessive disorder to happen, both the parents should be carriers, then the chance of recurrence in that family is 25%. Whereas in the case of an autosomal dominant disorder, the chance of, if you are identifying in the first degree relatives, the chance of this person to transmit the disease to the next generation is also 50%.
Dr. Sheila, we have a patient admitted with Fabry's cardiomyopathy, but we have not been able to source the enzyme therapy. Is it freely available in India?
Actually, that's what I told, because it's an extremely costly therapy, therapy for Fabry's disease, as well as therapy for Pompey's disease. Currently, we are treating around 19 patients with all these type of treatable lysosomal storage disorder. And there's a group called India Charitable Access Program, and it is an all India level program. And we enter the details of the patients, and there's a group, and we decide to which all patients it should be given, and these patients are being started on to therapy. But in Kerala, it is good to say that we have already started the enzyme replacement therapy free of cost for 2 patients with Pompey's disease. Excuse me, sir, from where are you coming from?
I'm from AIMS, Delhi. Dr. Madhulika has seen this patient, and she helped us in diagnosing this patient.
Okay. So there are 2 things, sir. One is we can do give an enzyme replacement therapy, and currently 5 of our patients are on another therapy called migalastat, which is a substrate reduction therapy, which is an oral therapy which can be given once in an alternate day as a tablet. So 5 of our patients are on migalastat also for Fabry's disease. So first we'll have to identify whether the patient is amenable to migalastat or not. If the patient is amenable to that particular moiety, we can start the patient on migalastat also.
So we'll get in touch with you for that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.